Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most compassionate. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Brothers, sisters and friends, and welcome to today's program. Today we're going to be discussing the Quranic argument for the existence of God, for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You may have noticed post 9/11 there has been emergence of the neo or the new atheist movement. We have the likes of Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, the late Christopher Hitchens, Dan Dennett, and many others who have been creating this mass movement, if you like, online and offline, of atheism. They're really pointing the finger at religion, and specifically Islam, and saying that religion is backward, immoral, unjust, and fundamentally it has no justification for its worldview. It has no evidence for claims like, does God exist? For example, Richard Dawkins, he wrote the book The God Delusion. Christopher Hitchens wrote the book God is Not Great, and he says that religion poisons everything. Is this true? Well, I really want to talk about one major issue concerning the new atheist movement, and that is that God doesn't exist. But I think if we look into the Quran, which as you know is the book of the Muslims, we find an amazing argument for the existence of Allah, for the existence of God. In chapter 52, verses 35 to 36, Allah says in the Quran, "Were you created from nothing? Did you create yourselves, or did you create the heavens and the earth?" Now, when we look at the explanation of these verses, we see something very amazing. We see that Allah, or the Quran, has given us four principles. Four amazing principles to assess or try and explain things that start, things that begin, things that come into being, such as a human being or the whole universe. And these four principles are as follows. Number one, can something come from or via nothing? Number two, can something create itself? Number three, can something be created by something else that's created? Or number four, can something be created by something uncreated? This is the four possible explanations with regards to things that begin to exist or things that come into being, such as the human being or the universe. But before we assess these options, we have to first understand, and we have to first justify the assumption of the Quran. Because the Quran here is assuming that human beings began to exist, and fundamentally it's assuming that the universe began to exist. Because these four options only make sense if the universe started, if the universe has a beginning. This is very important for us to understand. So before we discuss the assumptions, before we discuss the options, let's discuss that the universe began to exist. So if we can prove, if we can justify, if we can show good reasons to believe that the universe began to exist, then we could start talking about the four options. So, did the universe begin to exist? We have many reasons to believe and justify that the universe actually began. The first reason is what we would call the absurdity of the infinite, which basically means that the idea of infinity doesn't exist in the real material world. Because if the universe, brothers, sisters and friends, never had a beginning, it means the universe is eternal. If the universe is eternal, it means the past for the universe, the past of the universe is also eternal, which would mean that the history of the universe is infinite. But the question here is, can this be the case? Can we have an infinite history of past events? Can the past of the universe be infinite? Of course not. Because if we think about the idea of the infinity, or the idea of the infinite, it doesn't exist in the real world. Let me give you an example. Say in the room that you're watching this program, you have an infinite number of balls. If I take 5 balls away, how many balls do we have left? Well, some people may argue infinity minus 5, or we still have an infinite amount of balls. Whatever the case may be, we should still practically be able to count how many balls we have left. So it shows that there are contradictions with the idea of the infinite. Take another example. Say in this room you have 5 balls, and at every possible moment you add another ball. Ball number 6, ball number 7, ball 100, ball 1,000, ball 1,000,000, ball 1,000,000. If we continue like this, will we ever reach a number of balls that we can say is infinite? Of course not. We can never say it's infinite. The reason being is because you could always add another ball. So from this perspective, we see that the infinite is never actual. It's never actualized. It's just potential. This is what the Greek philosopher Aristotle, he said the infinite is never actualized. It's just potential. Also in this light, the famous German mathematician David Hilbert, he says the infinite is nowhere to be found in reality. It doesn't provide a legitimate basis for rational thought. So we see, when we apply this to the past of the universe, we know the past can't be infinite. It must be finite, which means the universe must have began to exist. Now someone may argue here, wait a minute, isn't God supposed to be infinite? Yes, but we're saying the infinite doesn't exist in the real material world? Yes, but what we mean here is that in the universe, the material world, the infinite doesn't exist. Outside of the universe, it may exist, but also the type of infinite we're talking about is what you would call a quantifiable infinite. An infinite you could quantify. Outside the universe, the infinite is qualitative, which basically means you can't quantify it. So there are 2 types of infinite. We're not talking about the infinite of God, which is qualitative. We're talking about the infinite in the real world, which is quantitative. This doesn't make sense, as we discussed with the examples of the balls. Now, we have another argument to justify that the universe came into being, the universe began to exist. And this is in the realm of astrophysics, or astrophysical evidence, or scientific evidence. Many of us have heard of the term the Big Bang. Now essentially, the Big Bang in cosmology is an explanation of the origins of the universe. A while ago, years ago, Hubble, he basically saw these distant luminous stars called Cepheid variables, and they were slightly drifting apart or shifted away than previously imagined. Coupled with the background radiation of the universe, they came to the conclusion that the universe was expanding. Now, if we rewind the clock, we will see that there was a point in the universe where time and space began. This is actually the Big Bang theory, or the hot standard model, which essentially says that there is a beginning in time and space began. Now, obviously we know there are other models of the Big Bang, for example, the oscillating model or the quantum fluctuation model, but all of these models require beginning in time. We can't run away from this. This is why one of the leading theoretical physicists of our time, theoretical cosmologists, Alexander Vilenkin, he said, we can't run away from a cosmic beginning. There was a beginning to the cosmos, there was a beginning to the entire universe. So, from the concept of the infinite, from astrophysical evidence such as the Big Bang, where there is a spatio-temporal boundary, which basically means time began, space began, we see that the universe began to exist. We see that the universe is not infinite, it's finite. It had a beginning. It was brought into being. Now we can assess the 4 options given by the Quran. since the universe began to exist, did it come from nothing or via nothing? Did it create itself? Was it created by something else that was created, or was it created by something uncreated? This is what we're going to do now. So let's go to the first option. Could the universe come from nothing or via nothing? Now, first and foremost, this is an impossibility. Intuitively, within our nature, we know this doesn't make sense. We all know from nothing, nothing comes. You may be wondering sometimes when we watch the TV, we see magic shows. And someone in a box, he covers the box and he taps the box, it's an empty box, and all of a sudden you have a bunch of flowers or a rabbit. Now we know from nothing, the empty space, you can't get flowers or a rabbit. So we are shocked and we're wondering, how did that happen? We know it's a trick. So from that perspective, naturally we know from nothing, nothing comes. This is why P.J. Swart, in his publication about time, said, if there is anything we can find inconceivable, is that something could arise from nothing. Now, but we have to understand here as well, is what we mean by nothing is not the universe really came from nothingness, but rather the universe was once nothing, then became something. This was the view of Ibn Taymiyyah, the classical scholar. He said, what God is saying is that the human being was once nothing and became something, or the universe was once nothing, then became something. So for something to come when it was nothing, or for something to appear when it was once nothing, always requires something. And this is why it is impossible to claim that something could come via nothing or from nothing. And after the break, we're going to discuss a contention to this argument, a counter-argument, which says, yes, you can have something from nothing because of physics and the quantum vacuum. But stay tuned and we'll discuss this after the break. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. We were discussing that since the universe began to exist, that we could apply the 4 principles or options the Quran gives us. Could it come from nothing or via nothing? Could it create itself? Was it created by something else that was created? Or was it created by something uncreated? And we were discussing, could the universe come from nothing or via nothing? And we've established this is an impossibility. However, there is a counter argument from some atheists, and they talk about physics. And they say in the quantum vacuum, in the quantum field, things appear. So they say something can come from nothing. But there is a big problem here. They're assuming that nothing is the quantum field, the quantum vacuum. But the quantum vacuum, ikhwan and akhawat, brothers and sisters and friends, is actually something. It's a rich structure, it's a sea of fluctuating energy, it obeys the laws of the universe. This is why the philosopher of science, John Polkinghorne, he says the quantum vacuum is a highly active entity, it is something. So the claim that things appear in the quantum vacuum from nothing, that's wrong, because the quantum vacuum is something. So we can safely say that the universe could not come via nothing or from nothing. The second option is, did the universe create itself? Well, again, brothers and sisters, this is an impossibility, because what does this mean? It would imply that the universe was in existence and not in existence at the same time. It would mean that the universe exists and doesn't exist at the same time. Because in order for it to create itself, it means it didn't exist. But in order for it to create itself, it means it must exist as well at the same time when it's not existing. Confused? Exactly. It shows the problem of self-creation. Take it as another way. Take another example. Think about yourself. Could you create yourself? Could your mother give birth to herself? Of course not. This is an impossibility. So we could safely say, from logic and just using our reason, that the universe couldn't create itself. However, there are 2 counter arguments, 2 contentions. The first one is, look at biology. In biology, you have single-celled organisms that self-replicate. It's called asexual reproduction, which basically means there is self-creation happening here. But this is a flawed analogy. It doesn't make sense, because in asexual reproduction in single-celled organisms, when they self-replicate, it already has to be in existence. But the universe, we know, was once not existing. Also, for single cells to self-replicate and self-create, it has to get energy from outside of itself in order for that to happen, which actually supports our argument that the universe requires a power or energy outside of itself in order for it to be created. So this counter-argument is not very strong. What about the other counter-argument? And this comes from Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking is a famous physicist, and he wrote the book, The Grand Design. And in The Grand Design, he says, because of gravity, the universe can self-create. But there's a problem here. What does gravity mean? Gravity is the law of attraction, or the force of attraction between two masses or two objects. So, he is assuming that some of the universe already exists for the rest of the universe to come into existence. And that's the problem. But we already know that the entire universe was once nothing, because we know the universe began to exist. But Stephen Hawking is assuming some of matter, some of mass, some of the universe was already in existence, plus gravity, because gravity is the law of attraction or force of attraction between two objects. And that needs to be in place before the rest of the universe comes into existence. So he's not really explaining how the universe, when it was not existing, could now exist. He's assuming the universe was already there and gravity was there. So, from this perspective, we could say in a healthy way that the universe could not create itself. What about the other option? Could the universe be created by something else that was created? Well, this is an impossibility. As Dr. Jafar Idris and a classical scholar like Ibn Taymiyyah, he said if this was the case, we would never have the universe in the first place. We would never have the universe in the first place. Why? Because think about it. If this universe was as a result of something else that was created, like another universe, and that universe was as a result of another universe, and that universe was as a result of another universe, and that universe was as a result of another universe, would we have this universe? Think about it. If this universe, which is universe number 1, was created by universe number 2, but that universe was also created by universe number 3, and universe number 3 was created by universe number 4, and that went on forever, would we ever have universe number 1, the universe we live in today? Of course not. Take the following analogy as an example. Say we have a whole row of dominoes, and the domino we see in front of us has fallen, and all the dominoes behind it have also fallen, but we can't see the end because it's too far. What does it mean about the end of the chain of dominoes? What does it mean about the end of the chain of dominoes? It means that there must have been a beginning. It couldn't have gone on forever. So from this perspective, likewise, we know the universe that we live in today couldn't be as a result of another thing that was created, like another universe, forever. There must have been a beginning. Take another analogy as an example. Say I'm a soldier and I want to shoot something. But before I can shoot, I have to ask permission from someone behind me to shoot. And then that person also has to ask permission behind him. And that goes on forever. Will I ever shoot? Of course not. Similarly, if this universe was as a result of another universe that was created, and that went on forever, we will never have the universe today. Which means there must have been something that was uncreated, which leads to the final option, that the universe must have been created by something uncreated. This is the best explanation coming from the Quran. However, all we know here is that there is something that created the universe that is uncreated. That's all we know. We can't say it's God, we can't say it's Allah. However, if we continue this type of reasoning, using our minds, using our intellect, our brains, as Allah says in the Quran, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, do not use your minds. Following this line of reasoning, we can now find or discover 6 properties of this uncreated creator. And they are so striking, so amazing, that they are in line with what the Quran says about Allah. Because Allah says in the Quran, قُلْ, say, هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ Allahu Samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Say, God is uniquely one, He is eternal, He begets not, nor was He begotten, and there is nothing like unto Him. And when we use our minds and understand what is the nature of this uncreated creator, we discover what the Quran discovered all those centuries ago. For instance, if this uncreated creator created the universe, He must be eternal. Because by the very fact of being uncreated, it means He wasn't created, and it means He had no beginning and He has no end. If this uncreated creator created the whole universe, He must be all-powerful, because He created the entire universe. If this creator created the entire universe, then He must be knowing and intelligent. Why? Because there are laws in the universe, like the law of gravity. There are natural laws, there are physical laws. And a lawgiver means that there is an intelligence or someone that knows. Also, if this uncreated creator created the universe, He must be immaterial and outside of the universe. As Allah says in the Quran, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, there is nothing like unto Him. Because, for example, if I create a chair, do I become the chair? If I create a building, do I become part of the building? No. This is why Ibn Taymiyyah said that the creator is distinct and disjoined from creation. This is why the Quran says, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Also, if this uncreated creator created the universe, He must have a will. Why? Because we've discussed that He's eternal. If this creator is eternal, and He brought into existence the universe that began, it only means that He chose the universe to come into existence. And choice means He has a will. And if He has a will, it means that He can have a relationship with conscious beings like human beings in the universe. Finally, if He has a will, if He's eternal, all powerful, knowing, outside of this universe, unlike anything, then He must be one. As Allah says, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say Allah is uniquely one. And the reason He's uniquely one is because if we follow the principle called Occam's razor, which basically says the simplest and most comprehensive explanation is the best explanation, we will conclude that Allah must be one. Because outside of the universe, how do we know there is 2, 3 or 4? To even claim there's 2, 3 or 4 creates far more problems than it solves. How do all these multiple creators have a relationship together? How did they create the order in the universe? It creates far more problems. So according to this principle, to say that God is one is the far most rational explanation and the most comprehensive. Also, we have to understand that look at the order of the universe, indicates there is one will in action here. And if we look at will in itself, we see from the argument of exclusion that there's one will, therefore there's one God. Because if there was multiple wills in competition, there would be chaos in the universe. Therefore, we have order in the universe, therefore there must be one will, therefore one God. So from this perspective, ikhwan and akhawat, using the Quran, chapter 52 verses 35 to 36, we know the universe began to exist, it couldn't come from nothing or via nothing, it couldn't create itself, it couldn't be created by something else that was created, but it was created by an uncreated creator with all these properties, that He's one, He has a will, He's eternal, He's powerful, He's intelligent, and He is outside and distinct from this universe. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. The Quran has given us this argument 1400 years ago, and the atheists do not have a response. We've dealt with the contentions as well. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.